If you're using auto ISO and shooting in aperture priority mode, and you're still getting soft or slightly blurry shots when your exposure looks pretty right, you're not alone with this problem. And the good news is that there's a very, very simple setting that can really help you out fast. The bad news is that that fix has within it a few hidden limitations, if you like, that can still mess up your images. In this video, I'll walk you through the basic fix, which is the minimum shutter speed setting, the hidden problems that also come with having the auto ISO on, and also when to take full control of your settings. Here's the straightforward fix. You come across to menu, press menu. Now I'm already on the setting, but if you're not on it, you're looking for the camera icon number 2, and I'll move it around with the wheel wherever you find yourself and you open up the menu. What you're looking for is, as I say, the camera icon number 2, and you go to the ISO speed settings. Press the set button, that opens it up, and you've got choice. And at the bottom, you've got minimum shutter speed. Now, this now allows it, whatever you set in this, it won't drop below. And you can set it by either the wheel at the top, where I've got my thumb, scroll along, that'll alter whatever shutter speed that you're choosing, depending on what length lens you've got. So I'm going to try quite a high shutter speed. I'm going to make sure that the shutter speed's sharp enough. While I've got it on the tripod at the moment, I'm going to make sure the shutter speed's sharp enough for when I'm hand holding. No questions asked. I've got a 35mm. I'm covered. I'm fully covered there. So I come across, I press set, and that holds that. So now, with the auto ISO, what's going to happen, I've got it on AV, aperture priority. I've got the auto ISO on, but I've set a minimum. So now we have a situation where with the auto ISO, by setting this minimum shutter speed, it now prevents it from going slower than what you've selected. Now let's talk about why this setting even matters. And it's when you're using the AV, the aperture priority mode with auto ISO, your camera follows a really basic rule, which it chooses a shutter speed around a shutter speed that's either equal or one above the focal length that you've got. So as an example of, just for the sake of argument, say you had a 100mm lens, it might pick 100 or a 1/25th second, but that's the maximum that it will go to. It then simply increases the ISO as it needs to for the whatever the light level is, for the various level of brightness. Now it seems super smart, but it's not always enough. So if you are seeing some lack of sharpness in handheld shots, especially if your lens doesn't have stabilization as an example, or you're using a longer focal length, which is often when this failing can become more exaggerated. For instance, if you've got a 200mm lens and it's set itself automatically at 200 or a 250th, often that won't be enough for a handheld sharp image. And also with high resolution cameras now, the tiniest bit of shake really does get magnified. So even though the camera's doing what it's supposed to do, it might not be enough for your sharp image, which is the whole point of what we've just done. We've now gone, okay, say I've got high resolution, say I haven't got the steadiest of hands, etc. So now we want to maybe go 2 up. Now what I've done is I've gone more extreme, but let's just say come back to the 100mm example. So instead of going at 1 or 1/25, and even going 1 up, let's say we went to 250th, now I'd even go to at least 500, if not 1,000 for the 100mm lens, because you just want that certainty. But I'd safeguard by going even 2 above, if not 3, but certainly 2 above. So if it's setting it around, if you've got the 100mm lens example, instead of 100 or a 1/25, I'd go not only to 250, I'd go to at least 500th of a second, preferably even to the thousands. And you've done this minimum shutter so as to get better handheld sharpness. Most cameras will let you set the minimum shutter speed in auto ISO settings. So it's just simply saying to your camera, don't let the shutter speed drop below this number. If it gets too dark, it just increases the ISO. So, for example, you set to 250th, your camera will never go slower than the 250th. It'll just raise the ISO to keep that exposure. Now, there are still limitations to this, and in this case, it's the ISO hits the ceiling limitation and forces the shutter speed back. So your camera has its ISO range, and the camera will generally have an ISO perhaps one higher than what it can offer in the auto range. So you need to be mindful that, say, if you're in very low light and you've got a shutter speed, even though you've set it, it will override it. Like in this case, the 2,000th of a second, if it hits that maximum 25,600 ISO, it will then still drag that shutter speed down. So check what is the maximum setting. Now, to prove this point, or to show this point, I'm going to put the ISO auto range down to 200. I've got the 2,000ths of a second. So now it's limited to 200 ISO. Now, I'm in light that's not going to cope with super fast shutter speed. It's going to I've got it now on 8,000ths of a second. I've got it on 200 ISO. So it's going to be forced, even though I've told it to stay with the 8,000ths, it can't if it's going to do a correct exposure. So here we are, 200 ISO. It's gone to its maximum. And see how it is forced to go to 1/15th of a second. Keep an eye out for the ISO ceiling trap. The auto ISO hits the maximum of the ISO that's either set or the maximum that the camera will offer in auto setting, which is not always the maximum the camera offers in manual. The shutter speed slows down as a result, and the sharpness suffers again. As I say, regular situation, no problem whatsoever. You won't be faced with this issue. But if for some reason you find, hang on, I'm in really low light and the shutter speed's not obeying my minimum, this may well be why. Now, another aspect to all this with the auto ISO, currently, if you don't override the shutter speed at all, with a zoom lens, what it does, unlike the prime lens where it just reads that one lens, in a zoom lens, let's say, sake of argument, you've got, as an example, you've got a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. If, say, you're photographing at 80 millimeters on the zoom, it will read that length. If it reads that you're at 200 millimeters, it reads that and then sets the minimum shutter speed, as in this example of the 200 millimeter, it'd be, say, 2/50th of a second. If you're at 70 millimeters, it would be, 80th of a second it would go with. And of course, as discussed, and the solution is to set that minimum, but I'd set the minimum keeping in mind the maximum of the focal length. So I'd be setting my shutter speed minimum based on the 200 millimeter focal length that I could reach on that zoom. Important to know that when you do put on your zoom lens, it will automatically read whatever focal length it is. But if you're telling it not to drop below 2,000ths of a second, well, it won't, including when it's on the 70 millimeter aspect. Auto ISO is absolutely fabulous. It's got a lot of uses, a lot of places where it's really, really good, until it's not. And for me, one of the cases where it's not is when I want to consistently do long exposures. I do seascapes, etc. What I'll do, I'll leave a link in the description if you'd like a 5-day free email series around mistakes with long exposures. I'll leave that in the description. Check that out if it's something of interest. But in this example, when I'm shooting long exposures, I want to make sure that my ISO, I just want to manually set it to 100 or 200 or whatever the case may be. But typically I've got the ISO at 100 and I want it just manually fixed there so it doesn't budge. So that's one time where you just want to take over full control, keeping in mind that you can still keep your aperture priority mode, your AV mode in this case with the Canon, and that you have all that flexibility. But I like to then come off any auto ISO. The auto ISO is a fantastic setting. It can be absolutely super helpful. But the trick is to realize that perhaps you're not as fully covered as you think. Then the main one being is that the camera will select a shutter speed that's not quite fast enough for whatever particular lens you've got on, especially with the longer lenses, with the telephoto lenses. So by setting that minimum shutter speed, as we've seen in the video, by doing that, you're solving that problem. And when in doubt, take control, get out of the old auto ISO, set that ISO to whatever level that suits the photographic situation that you're in. If you found this helpful, do hit the like and subscribe so you can get more of the future videos. And I will catch you in the next video, and have fun with your photography. Enjoy your photography.